Chapter 53. Welcome Home. The burns Lake sustained healed within seconds, and she looked at Assur, who was still on fire. Lake, Lincoln, Jack, and Adam wondered if it was all over and if they had actually saved the world. Verona said, "With our friend Malcolm's help, we all stuck together, and in doing so we won. It truly was the only way," she said with a smile. "The earth is once safe again." Although they all stood there in disbelief, nobody doubted Verona. By now, even Adam knew that she was always right. They all looked at Assur, wondering what would happen next. As he floated in the middle of his living room, Assur looked back at his new army of gifted young and brave soldiers, and through the flames, they could all see a proud smile on the old man's face. Then he turned, raised his arms, and thrust them towards his fireplace. With that, the flames left Assur's body and flew into the fireplace, setting the logs inside ablaze. Assur then slowly began to lower back to the floor, still fully dressed and without a single burn on his body. Assur picked up the golden tarnished green and purplish oil lamps and tossed them into the fire. As he did, he said, "Good will always defeat evil." The lamps disappeared into an abyss. When they saw this, the kids all finally realized that they were in fact all okay. Assur was back, and they had indeed saved the world from a Jinn invasion. Everyone started jumping and cheering and hugging. They had their victory over evil. The severely damaged living room was filled with pure excitement and exhilaration. After a while, Jack walked outside to catch his breath and reflect on his incredible adventure. It had stopped raining, and the wind was calm. It was a perfectly beautiful and peaceful night. But then Jack heard sirens and saw oscillating blue and red lights approaching. Within seconds, dozens of police squad cars came whipping down the small town street, skidding to a stop in the cul-de-sac in front of the house. Jack called out, Verona, you may want to come out here." Verona came out of the house, and with a quick blink of her eyes, and without uttering a single word, she convinced the police that no one had called and they should all be on their way. The squad cars all turned around and drove off. Once again, the neighborhood was silent and peaceful. Adam addressed the team. "You all are amazing, and I knew that even before you could turn invisible, or your voice was so strong it could stop evil demons in mid-leap." Adam smiled at Lincoln, then looked directly at Verona and said, "And even though you could sometimes drive me crazy, I knew you were amazing long before I found out you were an actual Jedi." Verona hugged Adam and kissed him on the cheek. She said, "Hold on for a second." Verona left the room. Adam said goodbye to the others. When Verona returned, she slid a folded-up piece of paper into Adam's front pocket, then said, "Now go save your parents." Before Adam and Lake could leave, Assur addressed his troops. "As long as there is corruption in the world, and as long as people make terrible decisions that hurt others, there will always be a chance that the Jinn will return. I must stay here and be the keeper of the flame, but we will need to rebuild our army of good and pure gifted young people. But remember, these gifts you have cannot be used frivolously. You discovered them because you were all pure and good. If powers are abused for personal gain, the universe and the sisters will take them away. Keep them hidden, and do not let anyone discover your secrets." The children all nodded. It was only a little after midnight on June 22, and the temperature must have dropped at least 20 degrees. It was a lovely summer night, But Adam and Lake did not stick around to enjoy it. They wanted to get back to their parents as fast as they could. Asur grabbed a garden hose and quickly sprayed down Nurin's beat-up old station wagon. Adam and Lake jumped in, waved goodbye to their friends, and drove away. Once on the road, Adam unfolded the paper Verona gave him. It said, "Give me a call sometime," and it had her phone number written on it. Adam smiled. He then looked at Lake, who was smiling at him, and said, "I love you, little sis." Lake responded, "Let's go home." After about another hour, Lincoln and Verona walked to their family's side of the relatively and astonishingly undamaged duplex from the weather. Jinn, or events of the past 2 weeks. Lincoln walked to his bedroom and put his iPod and headphones away in the top drawer of his dresser, and then he climbed into bed. Although it felt great to get into their own beds, neither one of them got even a wink of sleep before morning came, and they heard a car pulling into their driveway. Verona whispered to herself, "Adam?" They both raced to the front door. Lincoln swung it open. It was a beautiful, sun-shining morning. Verona and Lincoln's parents had just parked in the driveway and were getting out of their car. Phil got out and looked at the clear sky, shaking his head in disbelief. Then he turned and opened the trunk to grab a few suitcases while Jillian ran to her children. She gave them each a great big hug and kiss and cried, "I missed you guys so much. Are you guys okay?" Kara called and told me she was never able to make it. Verona thought it was a miracle that Aunt Kara never made it, but then realized she must have unwittingly used her Jedi mind trick powers on her. She looked at her worried mother calmly and, as if she was utterly bored the whole time, said, "Yes, we're fine." Jillian kept squeezing her kids and continued, "We never should have left you. I'm so sorry. Never again." Verona coyly said, "It's okay. We found enough to do to pass the time." Jillian said with concern, "I heard there were tornadoes. I was so worried, and the phones weren't working. I think the cell towers must have been down." She looked around at all the downed trees and damage and added, "It must have gotten bad. I'm so glad you're okay. You must have been so scared." Verona opened her mouth to respond, but Lincoln chimed in a strong, clear voice. "There were some scary moments, but we were brave." Jillian straightened back up and stared in shock. She had never heard her little boy speak so maturely and confidently. Lincoln continued, "I mean, I had my big sister to protect me, and she had me." Jillian looked at Lincoln and then at Verona. A smile came over her face, and she tilted her head slightly to the left and finally said, "Well, that is great. I'm very happy to hear it." Asur, who had been picking up his ransacked home, and Jack, who was vacuuming, stopped their chores and stepped out onto the adjoining front porch. Phil greeted him as he was carrying bags towards the house. "Good morning, Asur. Doing some remodeling, huh?" Asur responded, "It's a new day. Time for some changes." Then Asur asked, "Did you have a nice trip?" Phil walked by and grunted, "Man, it rained the whole time." Then Phil disappeared into the house. While her father was inside, Verona noticed a purple hat lying on the ground next to some lilac bushes. She picked it up and dusted it off, handing it to Lincoln, saying, "I think you dropped something last night, buddy." Lincoln genuinely thanked her for the souvenir, but sarcastically added, "Now every time I look at it, I'll be able to remember our great adventure together." Moments later, Phil returned with no bags in his hands and said, "Rona, Link, let's have a hug." Lincoln and Verona leaped into their father's arms and squeezed tight. Phil looked at his kids and questioned, "Minnesota Vikings? That's my team. You know I grew up in North Dakota, right? Where on earth did you get that?" The two siblings looked at each other and laughed. Then Jillian happily asked, "Who wants some breakfast?" She addressed a sir and said, "I want to thank you so much for watching the kids and keeping them safe. We are very lucky to have you as our neighbor." A sir bent forward in a mini bow, straightened up, and said, "Thank you, but I am the lucky one." Everybody else had already gone into the house. Jillian invited a sir over for breakfast, but a sir said, "Thank you, I would love to, but I will have to take a rain check. There is something that I must do." Everyone walked back out onto the porch. A sir asked Verona to tend to his fire while he was gone. Then he grabbed his car keys from the hook by the front door, and a couple of minutes later, the whole Destin family watched as a sir drove his little bug down the street and disappeared around the bend. Then Phil asked, "Who's your friend?" Lincoln answered, "This is our friend Jack." The kids had never brought anyone home before, so Jillian was surprised but happy that her kids were making friends. Something had changed with her children. She wasn't sure what it was, but she was grateful anyway. Jillian smiled warmly at Jack and said, "Would you like some breakfast? You're welcome to join us." Jack was absolutely famished. He responded with a smile, "Yes, ma'am." Then Jack asked if he could use their phone. Phil handed the young man his cell phone and went to the car to get some more bags, and Lincoln helped his dad. Jack took a deep breath and dialed his home number. His mother, without knowing, who was on the other end of the line, answered. "Jack?" Jack said. "Yes, Mama, it's me. I'm okay." But before he could apologize, she said, "Oh, thank the heavens. I was so worried, and I am so sorry. I haven't been paying enough attention to you. This is all my fault. Just tell me where you are, and I will come get you. I love you so much, son." With tears now streaming down his face, Jack answered, "I love you too, Mama." After a few more minutes, Jack hung up, wiped the tears away, and joined his friends at the kitchen table. Jack thanked Mr. and Mrs. Destin and told them his mother would pick him up in about 9 hours. "9 hours? Where's she coming from?" Phil said with a mouthful of food. Jack said, "Memphis." Then Jack bit into one of Jillian's fabulous panini sandwiches and exclaimed, "Wow, this is outstanding."